Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Smart City Viewpoints podcast. I'm Jim Frazier, Vice President of Smart Cities here at ARC Advisory Group. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by Amir Hirsch, Business Development in North America for ST Engineering Telematics Wireless. Welcome today, Amir.
Thank you, Jim. It's a real honor to be on the podcast. As you know, I've been a fan for a long time, so can't believe I'm actually on the podcast.
Well, we actually, I know that you're a member of the IES Roadway Lighting Committee and some of the ANSI C136 and 137 committees. So we've crossed paths quite a few times in the past.
For sure.
So Telematics Wireless. Can you tell us a little bit about, who's Amir Hirsch and what brought you to this smart city domain?
Okay. Generally, I'm a software engineer, and I've been working in, when I first started, it used to be called M2M, which stands for machine-to-machine communication. Now the phrase is actually IoT, Internet of Things, and that's obviously changing. Now people are starting to call it Internet of Everything. So I've heard of IoE as well, and I've been doing that ever since for over 20 years already. I started out in ITS, which stands for Intelligent Transportation Systems, mainly doing projects with the Department of Homeland Security for border crossings, lots of freight trucks going across, and they needed a way to streamline processing those trucks and the cargo that's in it. And we were involved in a project that had to do with that. Law enforcement, toll roads, water resource management, which is just a huge industry nowadays, with water metering being the main aspect of it. And then most recently, smart street lighting and the advent of the smart city. At Telematics Wireless, we base smart cities on smart lighting, and I'll explain that later on in more detail, I think.
Sure. Amir, before we go into what's a smart city, while I know you fairly well, I didn't know you had an ITS background nor experience in water, and water is quite a valuable commodity, not only in North America but around the world, and managing that, conserving that, and preparing for future use of those resources is an important thing today.
Correct. Yes, water resource management is it's a huge industry, and water delivery systems and in general, water is obviously necessary for life. And when we have water delivery systems, a lot of them are at this point very antiquated. They're old. There's a lot of water loss in those systems, and using technology, you can really reduce the water loss and improve the quality of the service. So there is a whole industry behind it, lots of smarts, lots of sensors, lots of technology that's being deployed in the water industry, and it's constantly improving daily. And obviously, since water itself is so essential, there's the metering aspect behind it as well. So it's a revenue generating stream. Obviously, in many countries, it's subsidized because it is essential for survival. However, the end user ends up paying for the water that they use.
Wow. Well, before we get into technology and broadband versus narrowband backhaul and street lighting, What I know you have experience around the world, not only in those vertical domains, but what? Let me just ask that broad question. So, what is a smart city?
Well, a smart city, I keep thinking back to the conversation I had with Kevin Fitzmaurice from Georgia Power. I know you know Kevin as well.
Yeah.
He's in the same circles that we both meet each other in every once in a while. Right. He always tells me when it comes to his realm, which is street lighting, he's responsible at Georgia Power for street lighting. The common term of smart street lighting, he believes it's a fallacy, right? It's not smart street lighting, it's network street lighting. And in my opinion, when it comes to the smart city, again, it's not necessarily that it's a smart city, but you have a network city. So you have the ability of providing independent networks throughout the city that enable collection of data from a whole bunch of sensors and actuators that are located throughout the city. And those sensors actually disseminate the information back to the central management system, at which point the central management system is where the smarts are. And it can determine whether or not, it needs to take some kind of action based on the data that's being collected, or, it forwards it on to a decision maker that's within the municipality that can at that point determine whether or not a decision needs to be made based on the information that's arrived.
Correct. I wholeheartedly agree. Let me ask, what benefits do you see? And let me preface it with a comment that the lighting community, lighting suppliers are facing commoditization. The price of lighting is rapidly drifting downward due to LED technology. It's a simpler assemblage, as well as the life of a fixture is greatly extended from a 2, 3, 4 year time frame to 10 or 15 or maybe even 20. So many vendors are embedding some type of backhaul data networking architecture, but many of them are struggling with what business cases are can be supported. And sure, there's a million ideas out there, but what benefits do you see, and even more particularly, what business cases do you think are strong in that domain?
Yeah, and obviously you're talking to someone who's been living and breathing this, network smart technology for the past 20 years. So right. In my point of view, the benefits are absolutely enormous, right? There's potential to significantly cut costs of basic municipal operations. For example, street lighting, right? We were just discussing street lighting. If you have a smart controller, a network lighting controller that's sending data back and forth between a central management system, you can easily reduce the cost of operation. I know of one particular municipality that spends upwards of $500,000 a year just to have several guys driving around the city to determine whether lights are on or off at night. And with a central management system monitoring lights that are all online, you absolutely can use that $500,000 towards something better and more useful for the city itself. It's something that can be automated. You don't need to have people on the ground doing it, and those same people can be utilized to perfecting the system and improving the quality. Beyond street lighting, there's also obviously what we discussed earlier, which is the water delivery and metering, right? In the water industry and the water metering industry, which is also a municipal supplied asset. There are tons of problems. There's leak detection. There's water theft. There's wastewater and stormwater monitoring. So, if your wastewater or stormwater systems are not up to par, that's when floods occur. That's when sewage overflow occurs. I tell this a lot of times to people when I talk to them, especially municipalities, when I meet them. When you're walking down the street in the middle of the summer and you see a little puddle of water on the road, a lot of time that's sewage that just overflows from the manhole that's nearby. So, a system that can prevent that type of overflow is just immense. that you can, additionally with the water, there's pressure monitoring. So, the infrastructure a lot of times is very, very old. You got copper wires underground. They're going for, tens of miles. They're corroded. If you have pressure that's too high, a lot of times the water will just leak right out. I think it's estimated that between 20 to 50% of all water is lost in the ground. So if you think about it, for every gallon of water that comes out of your sink, there's another gallon that just disappeared into nowhere. And those gallons actually end up showing, but those gallons also end up showing.
So Amir, let's, this is fascinating. We've often heard that, putting a communicating sensor on a streetlight can, of course, backhaul electric meter data. Mm-hmm. And I just assume that we have, the electric meter is powered, so it would have a powered radio that would communicate back to a collector node, perhaps on a streetlight in many cases. I hadn't thought much of the water infrastructure, but can you? And I don't know if this is in your domain experience, but water meters are very often unpowered.
Right.
How do you get a water pressure sensor in an area where there is no, electrical supply source? And right. I'm guessing they're battery powered, but how long do they last, right. And do they exist? Is that a solution today?
Oh yeah, definitely. So again, you just hit the nail right on the head with what is one of the main challenges of not only collecting data from the pressure sensors, but from the water meters themselves, right? Water meters a lot of times are located underground, right? They're in a pit in front of your house, or if you're living in the inner city, they're inside the very center of the building in the pier, where all the piping is going through. And those are all battery operated devices. And at this point, this is where the network is the most crucial aspect of the system, because a network that's ultra low powered will last a lot longer, obviously. And today we're able to deploy water-based sensors and meters that have a lifespan of up to 22 years on a single AA battery. So if you think about it, in order to achieve that, the communication has to be extremely precise, and concise, not just precise, but also concise.
Wow. So what's the range of battery powered sensors, and how do you keep the battery, how do you keep that power available for some lengthy period of time? I'm guessing they awaken upon a command from a CMS?
Well, they awaken periodically at a set time. And, some of the protocol, there's many different ways to do it. And obviously there's several companies that are doing this and doing it well. But power management is very, very important, right?
So,
power management.
We focused on water. There's obviously a range of other applications.
Right.
What challenges are there to this smart city, initiative that we're seeing worldwide?
Well, honestly, the biggest challenge that I see is the municipalities themselves. And actually, that's not precise. Technology, as you know, especially since these short-range communication networks have come into play, is changing very rapidly, right? There's new technology, new communications platforms that are coming out, all the time.
Right.
And a lot of the people that are running the show at the municipalities, they've been solving these problems without this technology for a long time. And all of a sudden, they have all these different new high-tech companies that are coming and presenting to them these extremely high-tech solutions for problems that they've been thinking about for years.
Right.
And sometimes I think it just might be overwhelming. It's just too much information, And too much information can sometimes lead to the decision of, I better not make this decision. Why don't I just leave it to the next guy and they'll make the decision? And in my opinion, this is one of the main challenges, that smart cities face today. There's so much technology available, and the decision makers are not necessarily the people that have the expertise to determine which of these technologies is the right technology for their municipality.
That's a broad, excuse me, a broad comment. Digital transformation actually has three pillars. And the first is the actual new technology. The second is the new business cases and new business processes that are engendered and are enabled by that technology. And thirdly, and this is in my view too, the weakest link, is it's the people and the staff, because they need to be trained, and embrace both the technology to support the technology, and they need to be trained and they need to embrace those new business cases. And it's very easy, particularly for a public agency worker, to punt and say, let's leave it for the next guy, and I'm not going to make a bet my pension decision, let's say.
Exactly. And I'll tell you something. I feel like a lot of times it also comes down to the person that's sitting in front of the municipality and presenting them with the solution at hand, right? Because, for instance, for me, I've been with ST Engineering Telematics Wireless for the last 15 years. And of those 15 years, I spent 9 years actually developing the products. And then just the last 6 years hitting the road and trying to get those products out. And so when I sit in front of the potential users, I get to hear firsthand from them, what they like, what they don't like. And when they ask me questions, a lot of times, I know the answers, I know the ins and outs, I know the exact bits of the data that are transferred in the system, where I can give a very, very simple explanation, but one that shows that, I'm not just making stuff up. And I think that, that's not to say that I'm not rejected a lot of times. Obviously, a lot of times I meet with municipalities and they tell me, okay, that was interesting. But other times with municipalities and engineers, and they appreciate the fact that the knowledge level that I'm presenting shows that I've been doing this for a really long time.
Right. Particularly, as a product designer.
Exactly.
So, you introduced that idea of the public agency staff getting buried by vendors.
Right.
There is a tremendous amount of very compelling technological solutions out there, and that's also being supported by a range of sales folks that are not shy in over marketing and over promoting their solution. And very often, if you there's a saying, if your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Exactly. And that actually, you're leading me to another very important point, which is, the way I view smart cities and the way we view the solutions that we recommend to our potential customers is that one size definitely does not fit all, right? What's good for New York City might not be the same thing that's good for the city of Cleveland or the city of Rome in Georgia, right? Those are three completely different cities with completely different issues, and presenting the same solution to all three cities is definitely not right. If you take Montreal, for example, which has a smart lighting system in place, and they're now looking at, what can we do with the smart lighting system and this network infrastructure that we've put out. For them, one of their main issues is they spend $300 million a year, moving water around, right? They get an immense amount of snow and they're just moving that water around all over the place. Well, Miami or my hometown of Austin here doesn't have that problem.
Right.
So it's not something that we even need to consider over here. So every city has a unique set of problems that they need to solve.
So how should a city assess and vet the technologies that and solutions that they may be considering?
That's a really good question. I think the bottom line is that the network component of the solution, like I said, smart cities, in my view, is a network city. So the network component is the most important component, right? What good is it for a municipality to put out 1,000 sensors only to find out after that they've deployed them they can't communicate with 20% of them?
Right.
Your solution is only as your network. So again, like I said, the one size does not fit all is key. Every municipality has to assess based on their own needs what is the best network technology for what they're trying to achieve. And again, this goes back to the question you asked me about challenges earlier. Another challenge is the fact of interoperability. And I know this is something that you're very, I've heard you talk about this specific issue several times in our meetings. Interoperability is a huge issue, right? Because you currently, as you know, a lot of vendors are presenting their systems as interoperable, when in fact they're not, right? They're interoperable only with their own ecosystem that's built internally in their organization.
And I mean, Amir, I know you appreciate this because, coming from your background in the ITS community, know today that in the transportation world, if you source a traffic signal, a ramp meter, a weather station, a piece of connected vehicle roadside equipment, all of those have unambiguous interoperable data tables and APIs. That's just how it is. So you don't care who your traffic signal comes from. It plugs into the head end. We don't have that in a lot of the smart city verticals that are out there today.
Exactly.
I do want to go back though, that this, I call it a backhaul network, but this data networking really is foundational for any smart city application you're doing. It could be water management. It could be cameras. It could be some more basic applications in the developing world. But for me, the idea of a smart city is collecting that data, creating actionable information, removing the silos, and doing something positive. In a way, it supports the 3 pillars of sustainability, which are preserving and enhancing the environment, preserving and enhancing human quality of life. So that's safety at a crosswalk, that's better air quality, but that's also better jobs. But the third pillar is doing those first two, environment and human quality of life, in a economically sustainable manner, meaning it's got to be paid for in, 2, 3, 4 years.
And again, that's another one of the challenges, is finding the ROI. You may or may not know, but I one of my volunteer efforts is chairing the IEEE Smart City Planning and Technology Standard. It's been inspired by, and I'm sure you're well familiar with, systems engineering, particularly from the U.S. Department of Transportation approach. And what that community is doing is attempting to just standardize the process of planning, not look at any technologies. And it's not a magical process. It seems to make common sense to anyone who reads it. It defines what's a stakeholder, what's a stakeholder community, what's a user need of those stakeholder communities, and once you collect those, how do you determine which ones have consensus? And lastly, how do you take those consensus-based needs and refine them into a measurable functional requirement that can be a product spec, an RFP, an RFI, or something you could actually do something with. But underlying all of that is you need a backhaul network
to collect that data.
Correct.
And there's nothing that's more ubiquitous out there than the street light.
Right, exactly.
Indeed. So, Amir, what are some simple, practical business cases and ideas that you've seen municipalities and public agencies deploy?
Well, I mean, there's quite a bit of them, and I always value municipalities that, you know, think out of the box and try to solve issues that they have with solutions that may not currently exist. You know, for example, we had in Israel this municipality of Eilat, which is, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with Israel, but at the very southern tip of Israel, there's a tiny strip of the Red Sea, which has just amazingly beautiful coral reefs all throughout. I mean, you step into the water and, you know, 10 feet in, you're just inundated with beautiful fish and corals. And, you know, as you know, living in Florida, the coral community is very susceptible to pollution. You know, they die off very quickly. So what happened was the municipality built up this strip of coastline with humongous Vegas-sized hotels. I mean, just huge ones. And their sewage infrastructure was just not built to handle it. And what was happening was, you know, after dinner or breakfast, you know, the buffet, everybody would go up to their room, flush the toilet, and sewage would flow into the sea. So basically, they were slowly killing off the one thing that they had there that everybody was coming to see. And so they approached us and they said, you know, we have this issue, we have this problem, we don't know how to stop it. Can you help us find a solution? And so what happened was I actually went down there. This was when I was still working as a software guy at the company, not business development for North America. And rather than seeing the coral reefs, I happened to look into every manhole cover that they had to see what's happening down there, which was a lot of fun, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And we came up with a sewage monitoring solution for them, which was very simple. You know, you just drop in these 2 float sensors at different heights, and as the sewage level goes up, you reduce the water pressure in the systems so that there's less water going into the sewers. And since we've deployed that, they've had absolutely no spills. And this has been for 6 years now. And the beautiful thing about it is that the streetlights, right, if you think about it, if you're putting a sensor underneath a manhole, which is made out of metal, it's underneath the ground, it's underneath the street, there's concrete all around. You know, we had to get the signal out only as far as the nearest street light in order to collect the data. And just wouldn't you know it, that every single manhole has a street light directly above it. So it made this solution extremely easy, very low cost. Obviously, you know, when you deploy a sewage monitoring sensor, it's something you don't want to visit too many times. So, you know, these particular sensors have a 5-year lifespan on batteries. But it's just a very simple solution that solved a major issue that this municipality had. And this is one. I mean, obviously, closer to home here in Cleveland, Ohio, for instance, they had an issue where they wanted their public safety, mainly the police, to be able to go into a neighborhood in the evening and have a lot more light available. So what they're doing now in their retrofit project is they're actually deploying streetlights in residential neighborhoods that are a lot more powerful than what they need for lighting purposes. So if they need a certain amount of foot candles, they're actually deploying lights that provide double that. And as the lights come online with the network lighting controller that we supply to them, the network of the CMS is actually able to determine, based on the location of the light fixture, whether it's a residential neighborhood or whether it's a commercial neighborhood. And based on that, it determines the light level that the light fixture will have from that point on. So for instance, in residential neighborhoods, we're only putting the lights on at about half. And then the public safety guys that work for the municipality, they have access to the CMS. If they're sending the police out to investigate a certain area, they'll actually turn on 3 or 4 blocks, they'll blast it up to 100%. So that the police have a lot more light available to them during the night. And this, in my opinion, is just a really out-of-the-box way to think about this type of technology that's available now. There's no way you could have done this before.
No, you're absolutely right. As you know, I'm down here in South Florida, and we have. I was thinking about your environmental application there. We not only have coral reefs down here, but we have a lot of turtles that are nesting.
Correct.
And while it's not widely deployed yet, we're starting to see some remote control of adjustable color temperature streetlights.
Right,
because turtles can't see below 2300 K.
Right.
They like to navigate by blue moonlight, and a lot of things have been tried, but the dual or color adjustable or adjustable spectral power density fixtures are coming to fruition here in Florida.
Right.
Those are fascinating applications. Do you have another one or two you could share?
Well, I mean, you brought up this particular instance with the turtles. So we did actually do a project with the city of Key West, similar to what you're describing now with the turtles. To be honest with you, I don't remember what the results were, but because this was about 5 years ago. But at the time, you couldn't control the color temperature of the light. So I know that that's a new technology that's just emerging now.
Yeah, I know that. I think I read about that one, and I think it was two colors, red and white and you change it depending on the season.
Right, exactly. And then another simple one is very close to Denver. There's a brand new development that's coming up called Sterling Ranch. It's designed to be, the premier smart city. All the homes are, connected, all the metering. They're trying to be a zero carbon footprint city. So they have, rainwater harvesting as well as, they have these photo sensors on the roofs for creating electricity. Okay. And they deployed streetlights with our control system on them. But in addition to the streetlights themselves, on every pole, they put what's known as an RGB beacon, which is RGB stands for red, green, blue. And the beacons can change color based on, certain emergency notification requirements, as well as every third streetlight, they deployed a speaker. So all three of these devices are actually controlled by the same node that's on the 7-pin receptacle. Okay. And using this, they tied it into they have a Douglas County, which is a county where it's in, has a code red system, which can automatically transfer data to the CMS and change the lighting based on emergency situations. So if they have, I can't think of any emergency situations that might come up right now, but, for example, if they have a tornado, right, they can turn on all the lights and flash them in a certain way and direct traffic in a way that people will reach safely. And, during Christmas, they used the speakers to play music. Okay. During certain hours of the day. So, they're looking for creative ways to utilize these smart city applications that they've deployed, but, using the streetlight assets and the poles and the real estate to enable a mass emergency notification system is genius, in my opinion.
No, that's interesting. I have heard of concepts, I don't know if they were deployed, where you would either have the streetlight or the beacon sequence its flashing to lead you away from the area that is under the incident.
Exactly.
That's interesting. I know there's a range of these. It's not that streetlight backhaul network and that node and all the things it could control is not only for Manhattan and San Francisco and Austin, Texas, and Miami. I know that anecdotally, I've participated in some applications, including one that's near and dear to my heart, where in Africa, in a city that had no electric power, they deployed some solar streetlights, and the children started doing homework under the streetlight as dusk was coming on. And a remote control vendor, street lighting vendor, did in fact deploy a few nodes to turn up the streetlights so the kids could do homework.
Right.
That saved enough power on that battery that a satellite internet provider was able to put a satellite dish internet connection on there and gave the kids quite a few tablets. So now in a developing country in Africa, some kids who don't have electric power are actually on tablets learning on the internet. So there's a huge spectrum here of applications from connected vehicles on Park Avenue down to things like that. Let me ask you a future looking question of we have connected and autonomous vehicles and other related technologies. What do you see happening technically in those nodes that reside on top of the streetlight, including perhaps connected or autonomous vehicle support?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, streetlights are ubiquitous. You have them all over the place. If you stick a node onto those things that has a network connection, now you have a network connection at every one of those poles. Obviously, the vehicles that are traveling in these municipalities and everywhere that they're traveling, especially with high pedestrian traffic, they need to be able to communicate with the infrastructure that's around the city as well. And these particular nodes, I think, could be a vehicle for that communication, right? The vehicles can send data of where they're traveling to, which direction they're going, how fast they're going. And these devices that are out there can actually collect that data and do some analytics, and based on that, determine traffic flow, determine when pedestrians can cross the street safely, redirect traffic if necessary. I think the sky's the limits, really, and especially with autonomous vehicles coming into play. I actually just heard last week that one of the major auto manufacturers is claiming that they're just months away from having a level 5 autonomous vehicle, which literally means you don't even have to have a steering wheel inside the vehicle. It's just you tell it where to go and it's going to get you there. Which, by the way, scares me. But I think that imagine getting into a car and not being able, there's no steering wheel. But
where does
20 years from now, our children are driving, it's going to be just commonplace, probably.
Oh yeah. That connected vehicle or autonomous vehicle support requires low latency.
Right.
So, because we might only have a few milliseconds to avoid running over or impacting a pedestrian or another vehicle or some fixed infrastructure. So that begs the question, in this architecture of, a microprocessor control device at a streetlight, a CMS, where does the processing happen? And are nodes on streetlights edge devices, or does all the processing happen at a head end? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think obviously in order to be able to make those split-second decisions, even nanosecond decisions, you have to have edge computing in place. And between you and me, I'm not sure that you and me and everybody else who's listening, I'm not sure that the current devices that are available for streetlight controls can provide that. In fact, I wouldn't bet on that. And especially when it comes to data that needs to be communicated back to the head end in order to make a much larger decision, such as traffic flow. That communication will need to be sped up dramatically, as well as in conjunction with edge computing at the device, which will have to be a lot faster than what can be done today. So I think we're still a few years out from that. But again, technology is changing so rapidly, and the microprocessors that are available today, are a fraction of the speed of what's going to be available tomorrow, as you know.
No, exactly. And I was interested in that perspective from you, given your, streetlight backhaul network and CMS experience. In the connected vehicle world, there is a protocol, I'm sure 802.11p DSRC, that has been out there for a while, and it's run into some hurdles because of budgetary funding. If your city needs to put a pole out there every 100 meters, that could be a pricey proposition on some heavily trafficked thoroughfares. So that what has been a challenge that's been hanging out there and hasn't been addressed for quite a while until the advent and promise of 5G.
Right, exactly.
It may be that obligation now gets offloaded to a private provider of 5G networks. But that 5G network might not necessarily, that 5G device may reside in a streetlight.
Right, exactly. I see a lot of excitement and potential with the 5G networks. Obviously we'll see what it ends up being, but I think the potential is enormous with these 5G networks. I think that the telcos that are deploying these networks, they need to be in the mindset of also providing services for these types of devices. I'm not sure that they're quite there yet in their thinking. They might be thinking, we need to provide, super fast streaming for, YouTube channels or whatever. They need to think also of the smart city and what applications could run on their networks. I'm not sure that they're thinking of that yet. When I've discussed it with some of them, it seems to me like it's not on top of their mind, but I'm hoping that, as more and more of this technology gets deployed and they see the business case for them, for them, it's a matter of the bottom line, right? They're spending billions and billions of dollars deploying these networks in order to make a profit. So if they can see the business case for it, I think they'll get in. But I think it's up to people like us to make them see the business case.
Indeed. Well, Amir, we've been time has truly flown on this podcast. We're just about out of time. Do you have some closing thoughts?
Well, generally, I think that with the municipalities that I meet, a lot of times I feel like the decision makers have a fear of making the wrong decision. And, if I could get any point across to them, it is that they should not have that fear. They should, listen to what's being presented to them, go with what, makes sense for their municipality. And, if need be, they can, there's enough equipment and technology and networks out there that have been tried and tested and proven. And, it's possible to make a good decision that's the right decision. And, if it wasn't the right decision down the line when it's time to replace those streetlights, you can change that decision. But I think, the main point I want to get across is don't be afraid to make a decision that will impact your residents and improve the quality of life in your city.
Great. Well, Amir, it's been a pleasure to have you. Once again, this has been, Jim Frazier, Smart City, Vice President of Smart Cities here at ARC Advisory Group. And my guest today has been Amir Hirsch, Business Development in North America for ST Engineering, Telematics Wireless. Amir, how can someone get a hold of you? What's your contact information?
Okay, perfect. My email address is very simple. It's just amirh@telematics-wireless.com. And you can also see me on Twitter @Amir_Hirsch. And then, I'll get my phone number as well if you want to call and have a discussion. It's 805-391-4423. And I'm available almost 24 hours a day. I have a little kid. I don't sleep much.
Well, Amir, thanks again for being a guest today, and hopefully we can have you on again soon with some more interesting applications. Thank you very much.
It's great to see you.
Take care.
Thanks.
Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.